Hey folks, how's it going? This is Seagull here, and this is one of those very rare times where I'm reviewing a movie. Sonic 3 is out now, and for the first time in my life, I actually watched a movie on the Thursday opening night rather than waiting until Friday or even a couple of days later. So this video review will work like what I've done before, where I give my more general and spoiler-free thoughts first, and then go into full spoiler and Easter egg territory in the second half. Don't worry, I will give a very clear warning when I'm about to get into that stuff. When I reviewed movie 2, I said it's unquestionably better than movie 1. Now I'm here to say movie 3 is even better than movie 2. Movie 3 wastes very little time. There's not even a side plot. Everything just ties into the main storyline. So if you hated, for example, the wedding scene in movie 2, you don't have to worry about something like that happening again here. Jim Carrey is still very much Jim Carrey though, and that wackiness is turned up more than ever now that he's playing two characters, Dr. Eggman and his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik. While I enjoyed how Jim Carrey and Jim Carrey played off each other, there was one part where you immediately go from something very epic, where everyone in the theater's cheering, to something very slapstick humor, and the mood change is so jarring. That was one of the few parts that I didn't really like all that much. If you've already watched the movie, then you very likely know which scene I'm talking about. So I can definitely understand that not everyone will necessarily like those scenes. But the most important part of the movie is definitely Shadow. It's the big selling point, and Keanu Reeves got to voice him. And I think he did a great job. The DLC for Shadow Gens had me a little concerned, but I think he did a lot better in the movie. And I know he was many people's top choice for who should play Shadow in these movies. As for Shadow's story, as well as how it ties into Gerald and Maria Robotnik, I think they handled it really well. It's not one-to-one to the games, and it doesn't need to be, but I think they adapted it to the movie universe really well. One element in particular that I really enjoyed is that you do get to see Shadow and Maria bonding more, because while we saw a little bit of that in the games, yeah, it was just not that much. Now, as of this year, we obviously got the Dark Beginnings animation as well as Shadow Gens that also came with Gerald Robotnik's diary that gave so much more lore. But back when we had only Sonic Adventure 2 for Shadow's story, we just didn't really get to see much of Maria at all. But I really loved the moments that Shadow had with Maria in the movie. It was really heartwarming, and I was wishing we got even more, but it was still really satisfying. However, there is one more important story beat to cover, because this is still Sonic 3. So Sonic's story arc in this movie is learning how to work as a member of a team, rather than him just handling everything himself and putting the entire weight of the world on his shoulders. As you can even see here, the beginnings of Team Sonic, and things obviously not going well. But by the end of the movie, Sonic does learn an important lesson, and it does tie very well into Shadow's story without spoiling anything here. It all does tie in together at the end. It makes sense, and it just helps this movie stand out more on its own merits rather than just being a straight up abridged adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2. One of the things I was personally most concerned about going into movie 3 is the music, because they didn't really do all that much with the previous two. Like, okay, we got a different version of Green Hill. They had Emerald Hill, but it was for some reason only in one of the trailers for movie 2. And then there was like that drowning theme that we barely heard. I didn't even hear it the first time I saw it. And yeah, for an Adventure 2 adaptation, it was important to have certain music. And without spoiling anything, I think they did do better. I mean, I still wish they'd go further still. I just feel like there's still too much of like, I don't know how you say it, like the generic orchestra music that you would normally hear in an action movie. It's like, oh yeah, something's happening, and it's just sort of like the same music you would expect to hear in like any action movie. I don't know, it would just be nice to hear even more Sonic remixes in certain scenes. I think including more nods to game music would help this movie stand out more and just give more style. I don't think it would necessarily alienate people. I think it would actually get people pretty intrigued, be like, oh wait, I gotta listen to this more, like the full version of it. So hopefully the music that was included in this movie could still get people to do that, because Sonic music is generally very highly regarded. Even in the games like 06, for example, that have a horrible reputation, even its music is very good, and I could even say the same thing. I mean, yeah, Sonic is definitely my favorite gaming franchise in terms of the music. I think the action sequences and the fight scenes were also improved over the previous two movies, especially those last 30 minutes. Like, the last half hour of this movie is so good. Even though I was at a theater where there weren't even that many people, despite it being the opening Thursday night, people were getting like really excited, and I was getting excited with them. And usually movies, while I watch them at the theater, don't draw that sort of reaction out of me. And it's just like, yeah, man, I'm looking forward to watching this movie again. I don't know when that's gonna be, but yeah, I enjoyed this movie so much. Easily the best out of the three. Honestly, how are they even going to top this? I think this could very well be the best video game movie I've ever seen, not just out of the Sonic movie trilogy. I'm not saying the Sonic movies are suddenly going to be really terrible after this. I think they'll be really good and entertaining. It's just, I don't know how they'll reach the peaks of movie 3 and Shadow and his story and all the epicness that goes with it. So I would love to be proven wrong, but even in terms of the games, Adventure 2 is still easily one of my favorites. There is both a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene, so make sure you watch both of those. So I guess now it's time to transition into spoilers. So, spoiler time in 3, 2, 1, Live and Learn! Yes, a remix of Live and Learn, the main theme of Adventure 2, does in fact play during Super Sonic and Super Shadow's epic team-up, which was something they definitely needed to do for a movie adapting Adventure 2 into its universe. Speaking of Super Shadow, in the movie, he is colored more to be a bright white, which I think is meant to be a deep cut reference to how initially in Adventure 2, Super Shadow was supposed to be colored more like that, but then in the final version, they did change him to be more like gold, like Super Sonic. But I remember as a kid, it was just such a specific memory seeing a picture of the early version online. And before I actually got to play the final story, I thought that's what he was supposed to look like in the final game too, and then got confused when that's what he looked like. So I'm glad they actually did this with the movie, not only just because of the reference, but also it helps him stand out more visually from Super Sonic, so it's easier to tell them apart when there's so much happening on screen. Then the movie ends with Sonic about to race Tails and Knuckles for real, and you get a really nice credit sequence with some Sega Saturn inspired animation. But then after that is over, you have the mid-credit scene where you see that Sonic has somehow overshot the finish line with Tails and Knuckles nowhere to be seen because he went all the way to New York, and he's suddenly attacked by Metal Sonic. And he looks like he's just straight out of the games. Metal Sonic looks really good. And after this, Metal Sonic fails to even really hurt Sonic at all, you see Sonic about to get jumped by many Metal Sonics. And it looks like things are about to go very badly for Sonic, but then you see all the Metal Sonics taken out by a cloaked figure with a very familiar looking hammer, who reveals herself to be none other than Amy Rose. After the credits fully end, we're on another planet. One of Shadow's inhibitor rings is in the middle of a crater. So yeah, that actually is really cool that they even incorporated the inhibitor rings in the final battle scene as well. And you see just Shadow's air shoes as he goes to pick up the inhibitor ring, revealing that he did survive. So he could very well come back. I don't know if he'll come back in the next movie, but movie 5, I think he would come back. Maybe there could be some really big battle happening, and then Shadow kind of swoops in, kind of like how Captain Marvel did in Avengers Endgame and saves everyone, or something like that. I'm just not sure how he would make it back to Earth. But talking more about the mid-credits scene, so it's definitely setting up Amy and Metal Sonic to be important plot devices for movie 4. So I think they'll probably also go to Little Planet, since that's where Amy is originally from in the games. They gotta explain where Amy is from in the movie universe. And it seems like, just from the way she dealt with Metal Sonic in this scene, that she's already had experience fighting Metal Sonic before. And it's also kind of an interesting sort of role reversal, because in Sonic CD, you first see Amy getting kidnapped by Metal Sonic, but then it's like, oh, just the complete opposite here. So I'm very intrigued, even though Amy's not my favorite Sonic character by any means. Just how are they going to handle her in the movie universe? And I think that was pretty clever that they had her just show up in this cloak, so you don't fully see her design. You see her face, but you don't get to see her signature dress. And well, she's had two, because she has like the classic outfit, and then with Sonic Adventure, they changed the design. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, it'll probably just be her modern dress, but I don't know, maybe they could do a different twist. I also wonder if Metal Sonic is being set up to be a long-term villain, and I think they could pull it off, especially if they incorporate like the Neo Metal Sonic and him having the Metal Overlord form, because Jim Carrey, like, he's talked about retiring, and I think they gave Jim Carrey another easy out, just like they did with movie 2, just in case he didn't want to return, but he did return for movie 3. And then it's like, well, they set it up so that he's potentially sacrificed himself to save the world in movie 3, even though you could maybe write it so that Shadow just saved Eggman at the last second. But yeah, that was a very heartfelt goodbye to Agent Stone. I actually almost cried. Yeah, I really like Agent Stone. So I wonder how Metal Sonic was made. Like, did Agent Stone make him? Or was there just some, like, random moment in between moments that we didn't see during movie 3 that Eggman used one of Sonic's quills to make Metal Sonic? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that ends up being explained. But if Jim Carrey does not come back for any more Sonic movies, then I could totally imagine Metal Sonic just taking his place. As for other Easter eggs and references, like, there are some pop culture references, like to the movie Speed and Back to the Future, but I want to focus mainly on the Sonic games here. So the very beginning of the movie does show Shadow breaking out of containment, and it is actually named after Prison Island, which is an important location that houses multiple levels from Adventure 2. After that, you see Sonic racing Tails and Knuckles, and at the end, there is a spinning signpost and a jingle referencing the end of Act music that appears in classic Sonic games. When Team Sonic is about to jump out of the helicopter over Tokyo, Sonic talks about low-budget flights, referencing his dialogue from the very first Hero Story cutscene in Sonic Adventure 2. At the end of the first confrontation with Shadow, you have Team Sonic defeated, and they do a nice nod to the opening CG cutscene of Shadow 05, where Sonic faints while Shadow stands behind him. After that, Shadow gets onto a motorcycle and wields a laser gun, also referencing just like the gameplay of Shadow 05. After the fight is over, Team Sonic meets the gun commander at a Chow-themed restaurant. It seems in the movie universe, Chow are just a popular icon in Japan, like, this whole time. Leading up to the movie, I saw people joking that Live and Learn would probably just be in there as someone's ringtone. Thankfully, that did not happen, but a different song got that treatment, which is Eggman's theme from Adventure 2. It's very catchy. It can be heard very briefly when Dr. Eggman's phone rings as Agent Stone calls him to warn him that Gerald and Shadow may be up to something more sinister than how they're just letting on. Near the climax of the movie, Gerald gives Eggman a new suit, which looks very similar to the one that Eggman wears in the modern games, while Gerald himself dons the same outfit except in white. The final battle of Sonic Adventure 2 involves the Bio Lizard pulling the Eclipse Cannon and the whole space colony arc towards Earth. But instead of that, the Bio Lizard has a much smaller cameo in a movie that Shadow and Maria watch together, where the Bio Lizard is just like labeled as this alien freak, and it leads Shadow to just like question himself. It's like, oh, like, am I like the Bio Lizard in that way? The actual final battle in the movie features a bunch of robots that look like one of the common gun robots you see as enemies in Adventure 2. When Sonic begins falling to Earth after the big space battle, Knuckles prepares to throw Tails after him in a way that reminds me of Knuckles' mid-air attack in Sonic Heroes, where he throws Sonic and Tails at enemies. Another Knuckles-related Easter egg is when Team Sonic is exploring the ruins of the old gun base where Maria met Shadow, Knuckles has a fear of ghosts, probably referencing the King Boom Boo boss fight in Adventure 2. But yep, he is afraid of Casper, the friendly ghost. There's also a neat reference to the Knuckles Paramount Plus series where he uses the Flames of Disaster move to bust into the gun base in London. And Wade does have a brief scene since he actually is the guardian of the Master Emerald. Alright, and another thing with the final space battle, the moon does get blown up, but in a different way, because in Adventure 2, Eggman threatens the Earth and he does like a test fire of the Eclipse Cannon on the moon, shattering half of it. But then in the movie, you have the Eclipse Cannon, which is already in the process of firing. You have Super Shadow and Super Sonic blocking it. But of course, they can't hold it forever, so they tilt the Eclipse Cannon. And, well, yeah, it blows up the moon that way before Super Shadow teleports the whole Eclipse Cannon away. Also, for pretty much the first half of the movie, Eggman and Agent Stone's base is this giant crab, which is definitely a reference to the crab meat, one of the first enemies you see in the original Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Genesis. That's pretty much it. I did notice during the credits when they listed all the music they used, City Escape was used, so I don't know where that was. I didn't hear it. Maybe it was when they were about to jump out of the helicopter. That would have made the most sense, but I guess that is something I'll just have to look for on a rewatch, just like with the drowning theme in movie 2, where I barely even heard it, even when I did hear it. So with that said, I want to talk about a couple of other things that are too spoilery to include in the first part of this review. So Krysten Ritter, you probably know her because she played Jessica Jones in that Netflix series for Marvel. She's really underutilized in Sonic 3 because she's playing like this second in command officer for Gun, and then you kind of have almost like as if you're building up to having her as a big bad. And I always wondered like, oh wait, is my prediction wrong that Gerald's not going to be the big bad? But no, I ended up being right. And then she was just kind of cast aside after the whole London trip. So it's like, is she gonna come back in movie 4 or something? I don't know. It just feels like there was something there they wanted to do with her, but then they just didn't really have the time for it in movie 3. Also, I gotta talk about that Super Sonic versus Super Shadow fight. That was amazing. Almost like something out of Dragon Ball Z. And then you have the one part where Sonic is basically beaten, he's on the ground, and then Super Shadow is just hovering over him, being condescending, being like, hey, you abandoned your friends. I thought you considered them your family. Especially, what's his name? Tom? And Sonic just gets so mad, he just smacks Shadow right in the face so hard that he just crashes right into the moon and loses his super form. And then you have Shadow being like, just do it, Sonic, finish the job, kill me, right here. He like points to his heart, like, Oh my gosh, that was so well done. Like, I need to watch that again for sure. But that was really good how, like, Sonic's story tied into Shadow's, where Shadow didn't really have much of a family aside from Maria, but then she ended up dying, of course. She did not get shot. I'm not surprised they didn't do that. They had her be in an explosion instead. But then there's like the whole thing where Shadow ends up hurting Tom because he thought that Tom was the gun commander, but he was just using a disguise at the time. But then, since you have Tom being hurt so badly, it does drive Sonic to try and get revenge on Shadow, just like how at the same time, Shadow is trying to get revenge on the whole world because of what happened to him and Maria. I think it's about time to wrap up this review though, so this is definitely the closest that we've been to the Sonic games so far, where it's like, movie 1 was mostly a road trip and getting to know Sonic and these movie characters in this universe for the first time. And then movie 2 did take some basic beats from both Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. And then the Sonic 3 movie is just like, yeah, it's pretty close to Sonic Adventure 2, while there are a lot of things that were still missing. Like, we didn't even have Rouge appear in the movie at all. At least Amy did appear in the mid-credits scene. But yeah, I wonder where they will go from here, if they will do more stuff that is closer to the games, because then it's just like, after Adventure 2, yeah, you have Heroes and 06 and Shadow 05. Maybe they could do Black Arm stuff, but I don't know. I think they could end up doing more original stuff in the future. But yeah, what a great movie. Highly recommend it to any Sonic fan, especially if you have attachment to Sonic Adventure 2 like I do, because it was one of the very first Sonic games I played. Because actually the first game I played was Sonic Advance on the Game Boy Advance, and then I played Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube. And I have lots of fond memories with my friends playing the multiplayer and that. But yeah, feel free to let me know your thoughts on Sonic 3 in the comment section below. And be sure to subscribe if you'd like to keep up with my latest gaming content. I will talk to you all later, and have a great day. Thanks for watching.